Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are so excited and honored for our guest. But before we talk to our guest today, I just want to give a little shout out to the Brotherhood for the Fallen. This is an event that we are going to be covering as a podcast. We got asked, we met with Boston Police last week, and, we're really excited to be able to put a video together to show what the Brotherhood of the Fallen is. And most importantly, the work that goes into it behind the scenes and how it honors and respects those that, have passed away in the line of duty, giving the ultimate sacrifice. So we are really excited and honored to be a part of that. And I think that is something that, is going to be an amazing time to do and meet some amazing people along the way. So we're really excited to be working with Boston PD on this. So back to our guest. Our guest is someone who I've been really excited about. I've had him circled on here for about a couple of months. Someone who I think is a tremendous coach. And as a college student, I was lucky enough to watch this coach at the college that I was at, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But someone who I think really just understands, the student athlete, understands what it takes to be a coach both on and off the court. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, from Salem State University, Chris Harvey.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. The honor is all mine. And, I mentioned just a few seconds ago that, I got to watch you at LaSalle. I went to a lot of basketball games. I knew a few kids in the team, but, I went to a lot of basketball games because at the time it was really like lacrosse and basketball were really the only two men's sports in the school. So, the basketball team was very good and very entertaining to watch. So I went to a lot of games on a lot of nights and just sat in the stands, was just a fan. So I've got to watch you for a long time. And like I said, I'm really lucky to have you on here today for sure.
Appreciate it.
So I'm just going to jump right into it. And this is typically what I ask our coaches, right out the gate is, obviously you fell in love with basketball as a young person. You played the sport, you understood the sport. And, at some point you thought to yourself, or maybe when did you think to yourself, this is something I see myself doing beyond as a player, but actually being involved in the game as a coach and rising the way you have?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anthony. And, when I was a high school player, I didn't think too much about it. But, if I had really given myself a minute, I was always better with my mind than my body in terms of playing the game. But, as a kid, it was just something I didn't think about with coaching for whatever reason. When I got out of Worcester State undergrad in '94, I was a mutual fund broker at Putnam Investments in Boston. And right around that same time, I reconnected with my high school coach and just said, hey, I got a niche. And he invited me, Rich Malillo, still my mentor to the day. I mean, still call him coach, but he's a friend. And he said, hey, why don't you come and coach the summer league team, 1995. So I started with him in 95 through 98. Right around 97, I said to him, I said, Coach, I want to see if I can, go to that next level of college. And it just so happened to be the school you decided on, LaSalle College, had gone co-ed in the fall of '96. And I think they took male students for the fall of '97. And, 1997, '98, I'm the assistant coach at LaSalle College.
Yeah, and it's awesome. So, that's it. I mean, when I got there, I was, spring of '01. So they only really had boys in the school for, I think that senior class was the first class when I was a freshman to boys that were accepted into the school, or men that were accepted into the school. So I got to ask you, just because I think this is just funny. I went to LaSalle. I graduated from there. The logo being the laser, one of the more lamest logos or mascots, I guess you could say, in the college level. Now, I'm not insulting it, but I'm just interested. Like, does that ever cross your mind? Like, what's a laser?
Yeah.
With the lasers?
Yeah, and I tell you what, man, a good friend of mine, Paul Phillips, who was the head coach at Clark at the time, and he would insert jokes about laser tag and all this and that. And there's a story though that I had heard, and again, I don't know if it's rumor mill or urban legend, but the choices were lasers and flying squirrels. Seeing since there were so many squirrels, as you remember, running across campus in Newton there.
I like to meet that committee. Committee that came down to that final too.
Yeah, like laser, and a vice president who just retired Kate, she had something to do with like laser being a beacon, and I don't think they wanted to go, as UMass Boston's the Beacons. So the logo, if I remember correctly, prior to the one that you may be aware of, was sort of the lighthouse with the beacon.
Oh.
I don't know if they ever used it, but it was in the mix, and then they sort of came up with the laser. And of course, spelled differently with a Z. So I mean, it was just a mess.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I felt like
Yeah,
they missed out on so much like merchandise, like that
yeah,
kids
no
could have
doubt.
bought at the school with the logo or whatever. I used to be like, I'm not buying something that says a laser on it,
Yeah,
So no insult to LaSalle. I love LaSalle, but I was curious. You
absolutely.
coached there, and yeah.
It gave
So
us both our starts, man.
right. Brought me to the direction that I'm in now. So, speaking of LaSalle, obviously when I was there, the basketball team was very successful. And, I know you guys did a great job of recruiting, not only in the New England area, but I know New York. There were a lot of kids from New York. I mean, talk about when you were obviously an assistant there, you had mentioned, but
Right.
taking over a program, what were some of the changes that you maybe made, or if any, that this is my program and maybe this is the way I want to do things a little bit differently than they were done before?
Andy, it's a great question because how everything fell into place is so unique. And I know we'll talk a little bit about mentoring younger coaches maybe down in the podcast. But
Yeah.
in the second year of being an assistant, Coach Catapano, our head coach, we were the same age. His dad is an NBA agent. Still, I think has his hands in it a little bit, but nowhere near when he was in the day. Represented a lot of the BC players. Manute Bol as well. He had a lot of talent, lot of people that he worked with. And so around the second year as being an assistant, Kat says to me, "Hey, I think I'm going to go to Division One. There's a guy from Wakefield, Ricky Boyages, so I believe at the time was at Ohio State, and he was in the mix for the William and Mary job. So Kat was really on his way up, and he gave me a lot of confidence and flexibility to recruit the team that I sort of envisioned as well. So that whole second year as an assistant, I really treated it as if the AD was to give me the head job, I'm going to go out and just go get after it. And one
Yeah.
of the things I did initially was I knew that at the time there was about 75 or so Division III programs in New England, and I just made this simple thing that came into my mind and say, I got to go where they're not. Like we're all outside of like the NESCAC and the NUMAC, we're really all recruiting the same kid. So I got lucky one time in New Jersey. I went up to an AAU program. I had no idea what I was doing as a young assistant. And there was this program, the Brooklyn Beast, run by Mike Schiraldi. And I go up to him after his game. All his kids are major Division One. And I get to talking to him, introduce myself, LaSalle, blah, blah, blah. And he says, "Hey, he says to me, hey, I like your approach." I said, "I want you to call this guy, Bob Starkman, down in Florida. He's a former New York City police officer. He's a U.S. Customs agent. Actually just wrote a book, a great book about coaching and law enforcement. But Inside Both Courts is the name of the book. But I established a relationship with Bob, and he sent all the kids from Florida and actually one kid from Southern California as well. And so we right away, there's no D3 in Florida. So we were getting high level talent that, in some respect might have played Division II if they had grown up around this area. And we just blew it up quick. I mean, we
Yeah.
went from a 17-9 team to in my first year to 3 straight NCAA tournaments, and then in the last year that I was there, we were 19-10, I think, or something like that. We went to the ECA season.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were phenomenal to watch. It just felt like you had athletes all over the court. You had guys who could play multiple positions. Some guys like defense. I mean, I'm a defensive guy with football at heart. So watching guys play defense, I think in basketball is just like poetry in motion, watching it happen when guys can lock people down. I felt like you guys had a pretty good system. So obviously you were at LaSalle and you had left LaSalle. Now, just for like a lot of young coaches and a lot of young listeners out there, talk about that decision making when you feel like, okay, I need to now maybe move on to another job, or I need to grow my career. And as a result of that, I'm taking, either a step sideways or a step up or whatever it is to kind of pursue in further along your career.
It didn't come easily to me to make that decision. And I think you and I had talked before that in hindsight, I probably should have stayed, and I could have easily have wound up at a Salem or somewhere else, and I loved my time at LaSalle. We grew the program very quickly. Financially, starting a young family, I just couldn't justify the amount of time that I was putting in for the salary. And in Division III, in a lot of respects, certainly at small private schools, and even, by the way, still at Salem State, there's always a fairly heavy administrative role attached to your job. So it's in essence doing two full-time jobs at the same time. And I just couldn't justify it. So, and then in that last year when we were 19 and whatever, I sort of hit the panic button a little bit. And I said, geez, if we start to trend downwards, how am I ever going to get another opportunity if we start losing games? The admission criteria in a good way had changed. The standards got a little higher. The financial aid discounts got a little smaller. So I just made a decision to take a phys ed job in my hometown of Somerville through my high school coach, who again, leads my career till the day. And, I was fortunate that Bob Sheldon had taken one of my assistants a few years prior, Reggie Hobbs, who's now the head coach at Lexington High School. He had taken him on to the tough staff. And so I called Reggie and said, hey, do you think Bob would, let me keep my name in the business for until I can get it? And that's really, at the end of the day, the decision. I had a Division I opportunity at Northern Arizona. My wife didn't want to relocate. It was a risky opportunity. It was literally, when I tell you, it was $20,000, full benefits. The connection was that I had made with the head coach at the time at Northern Arizona. I had done some regional scouting for him. They were playing Northeastern. I had met him through somewhere else, coach's clinic. And he asked me to do some scouting of Northeastern. This is long before like video became the big thing, right?
Yeah.
And they come down, played Northeastern, they beat them. And then I saw an opening on a staff. I gave him a call, and he's like, "Listen, man, it's $20,000, but if you want it, you can do it." My wife she didn't want to go. And then I had an opportunity to interview for the head job at Greensboro, not the D1 one, the Greensboro College in North Carolina. She didn't want to go down there either. So I just made a decision that I thought was in the best interest of me, my family. And I'm one of those guys, Anthony. Things have fallen into place in a good way. A little bit of luck, hard work, little luck.
Yeah, I think with a lot of hard work does come some luck. I think that's what hard work rewards. It rewards obviously your goal, but I also think hard work in there, luck falls in there somewhere because you are working so hard. So, and we'll talk about family a little bit. And I think that's, part of coaching that sometimes doesn't get always looked at, is the time and the effort and what you're doing and the work that you're putting into it. But it also comes at a sacrifice of being home and your hours are crazy and so on. So we'll jump into that in a little bit, but I'm glad you brought that up, Coach, because that's a huge aspect of coaching that I think is really important, especially for young coaches to understand as they get older and, maybe find that person and build that family and, want to pursue that career and understand that, with the passion also comes, sacrifice and putting real thought into you and your family and what's best for them. So absolutely, Coach, I couldn't agree with you more. And obviously you spent the year as an assistant in Tufts and then you kind of jumped into, an opportunity at Salem State. You interviewed for a job. I know you had interviewed for them previously in the past. I mean, just talk about the interview process out there in general in the college world. I mean, what are these schools looking for? What is it that, you can offer? I mean, what is it that, what's the process like, step by step into, going for a job at the college level?
Yeah, it's really nerve-wracking, and I forget who said it, but we could find it. It might have been Bobby Bowden actually at Florida State, but the saying goes, if you have to apply for a job, you're probably not getting it, and and that's true. Even at our level, and I think more so now than ever before. I've applied for some jobs while I was at Salem, even with the success that we've been fortunate to have, where the higher academic schools don't even acknowledge my resume at all. which I find fascinating. But so the process is my former, I shouldn't say my former, my friend who was the former head coach at Salem, kid I went to college with. He got an opportunity to go Division I at Quinnipiac. The job opened. I really liked my chances the second time around, being that I am a state school graduate. We had success at LaSalle. When I left there, we were 104 and 36. And then when I went to Tufts had a much longer tradition, but they hadn't had a lot of success in the national tournament prior. I was fortunate to come in with a great staff and a great group of guys, and we were able to get to the Sweet 16. So I think that helped. Whether I had much to do with it, who knows? Right place, right time. Did a second year at Tufts, not as successful as the first, but a winning season. And again, Salem opens. I go through the process, and I remember, it was cool. The local media. There's a gentleman who's since passed, Billy Kaporis. Kind of looked like Yoda, actually, same size. And Kipper was calling me all the time about getting insight into the job. And one of the things I had said to him prior to earning the job was, it's easy to go into a program that was, say, 2-20. You win 3-4 ball games, everybody thinks you're a genius.
Yeah.
I was replacing a friend who had gone 24-2 the year before. They got upset in the second round of the NCAA tournament at home. And I remember saying to Kipper, I go, hey, if we win 20 games, they're going to start the Salem witch trials again. It was, and actually it ended up being that first year we go 21-7, win the league, go the national tournament. We lost at Gettysburg the first year down that I was there. And, but it was a lengthy process. It started in March, and I didn't get hired until July 1. So there was a lot of sweating it out, because I knew I wasn't going back to Tufts for a third year. So it was a little bit of stress going on there, hoping that this one had went in my favor.
Yeah, that's a third. You're basically waiting a third of a year to hear about a job. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
But
it was.
With that, right? With that obviously comes the fact of, and I ask you this kind of seriously, but kind of kidding too. Recruiting, and I always find this so fascinating on how coaches recruit and where they look and how they look. But I was going to ask you, being in Salem and being at Salem State, how much of your recruiting pitch talks about Halloween? Because Halloween really in Salem is from September probably until like early November, right? So if they're a Halloween,
100%.
They love Halloween and candy and costumes. Is that part of your pitch at all?
Yeah, a little bit. Certainly when my kids were younger, I would talk a lot more about it. But we talk about September and October, like, guys, you come to Salem. You're going to go see 250,000 people, if not more, downtown. It's a great, but we don't practice on Halloween, Anthony, because I want my guys to go down and experience Salem and its traditions, and you meet some interesting people. And I've been in Salem long enough that honestly, you don't know if some people dress like that year round or if they're just doing it for those 2 months. I was telling you before, I had a woman come up to me in the soup factory, which is located in downtown Salem. And she tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, great game the other night. This is like 2009 or something like that. And she goes, I'm the witch of Salem. Now, she looked dressed normal to me, but then I looked at the gentleman who happens to own the soup factory, and he's like, yeah, I forget what he said her name was, but she's the witch of Salem. So it's we talk about it a fair amount, and it's just something to see for sure. We try to bring guys up to campus during that September, October, so they can go downtown, experience a little bit of it.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like I said, I was half serious, half kidding, but I think it's an experience. As someone who lives around here, I know when we used to play football games, if we were playing Bishop Fenwick High School, we always seemed to play them around Halloween, and we were planning on, should we leave really early and get there early because of the Halloween traffic at Salem, or do we leave at regular time and maybe get there 45 minutes before the game starts? It was a real debate traffic wise getting up there.
Yeah.
Salem's right there.
And I'm excited this year because Halloween's on a Sunday, I believe. So that means we never practice on Sundays unless it's a quirk in the schedule. So, I mean, we can now have a Saturday practice and not worry about, sort of missing a day. Cause I always give the kids or the players Halloween off just for my own sanity of trying to get out of it.
Right, and probably you have to take your kids trick-or-treating too, right? I mean, it's
Back
nice
then,
to
yeah,
yeah.
when the kids were younger, for sure. I didn't want to
Yeah.
miss out on that. Coaching, takes us away from a lot of things. So we have to really, and in Division III, one of the things that, I think folks may not understand, it's the wild, wild west. I mean, Division I and II, they have live and dead periods, for lack of a better phrase. That's it. That's the names of them. But in Division III, you recruit basically every day you want for 365. And when I was a younger head coach, type A personality, I was neurotic. Like if I was out every day because I felt like if I wasn't out, you were out, and you were out working me.
Right.
And that's a heavy toll to carry, and as I've matured, I start to think to be more efficient and more effective in recruiting. But man, those early days, it was 24/7.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Trust me, I
Yeah.
get it. So with recruiting, right? Let's talk about when a year ends. Let's say you're losing 5 or 6 seniors to your team, and you're going out and recruiting. Are you, as a coach, trying to recruit that specific position or positions that you're losing? Are you trying to go after best available? I mean, what goes into, I guess, a season ends? You kind of know your depth chart. You know who's not on there anymore. How do you go about saying, all right, are we replacing these guys, or is it just kind of best available? I mean, how does that work at your level?
Yeah, and Anthony, I think you could talk to any one of us in this business and get a lot of different answers. I mean,
Yeah.
respectfully, being at a state university, like let's say, and again, I'm just thinking that if I'm the head coach at Babson and I'm Steve Brennan, he can be a little bit more specific with his grocery shopping than I can be, right? Because Babson being a destination school for a lot of high-end business high school students, whereas I have to I use this term gettability. What's the gettability factor in a kid? Like, is it a kid that fits the what it is that Salem's looking for? Is it a first generational kid? Is it a city kid? Is it white, black, Hispanic, whatever it may be? So I'm trying to identify, the characteristics of each kid a little bit more to see if it's a fit. So it's a lot of best available. We do like to try to. One thing I've never done is over recruit. And a lot of people have different views on this. A lot of my very good friends have, hey, bring them in, let them, competition breeds it out. And I agree with that to an extent. But I also think that when you've extended an opportunity to a family, that you should honor that and, look at it. My thing has always been, hey, listen, if we actively recruiting you and we're telling you you're on the team, you've got the year, in some cases 2, but then, after that, you've got to make that jump.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you. I think, like you said, they're going around and looking at a lot of different schools, right? And so they're choosing you, whether it's you, the person, you, the school, the major that they might be looking into, and the school's really good for that. And you're kind of selling them on a complete package. So I understand your theory there, and trust me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've had football players that have gone on and played programs that recruit 50 guys in. And then you got to go in there and you feel like, well, they were in touch with me. They were texting me. They were calling me. I saw them a bunch. And then you go in there and it's 50 other guys they were probably doing the same exact thing to. So you don't feel that value either.
And I tell you, one of the other challenges in Division III is that the NCAA is really tight with that student athlete definition, meaning that we don't get to work with them personally in the off season, right?
Yeah.
So what I have found, maybe this speaks to my ability to develop players, I don't know, but I will say this, that in my experience of 25 years, 15, this is 15, but my time at Salem is that if you're a player on the roster and you're a guy, I don't know, let's say 11 through 15 for simple, that you never move up because you're always trying to recruit guys that are better. I know that's an oversimplistic way of saying it, but I tried to recently with my staff, and I was talking to like Reggie former assistant at LaSalle. I'm like, did we ever have a guy that went from the back end of the bench to the front end of the bench? And boy, I got to tell you, Anthony, we were having a hard time trying to come up with somebody, you know? So I guess, you know, my point with that is that if you're running a successful program and you have some good fortune and you have some success, you're going to be able to find some talent. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to see guys go from guy 12 to 6. It just, I haven't seen it consistently.
Yeah. And then when it comes to recruiting too, do you ever land somebody that you're just like, how do we get this kid? Or on the, or on the role reversal, right? How do we not get this kid? You know, I mean, does that happen a lot? Like, you know, when you recruit?
Oh, sure. Sure. I mean, you see it a fair amount with some of the smaller level privates that are really discounting guys and, you know, getting guys in that are sub 2.0. And, you know, there's some, we lose that. Obviously, we couldn't get the kid in, but, you know, I tell you, I'm trying to think because we had, the name might not mean much to a lot of folks, but Usman Dram played at New Mission, 6'9", lefty, very skilled. Ended up going to Quinnipiac after a year. I believe he went to Marianapolis Prep. He hadn't signed with Marianapolis Prep. He was sitting in the office at Salem State. We have a very good relationship with his head coach at the time. And Usman Dram, you know, who ended up going overseas playing big professional basketball. It was like either he's going to Marianapolis or he's coming to Salem State. And it was, you know, so we've had him. There's another one that escapes me that ended up, Tony Gallo. Tony Gallo, who is a Lynn kid, ended up playing Division I at Coppin State and played pro overseas for a while. Very successful skill developer now up on the North Shore. And he was coming to Salem, you know, and something played out. He was able to get to a D2. It might have been Merrimack when they were D2, and ended up turning that into Coppin State, Division I. So we've had it on sort of the other end where it's like, my God, we're going to get these guys, you know. And then all of a sudden, you know, it goes the other way. I mean, we've been Brian Clark jumps out. You know, he just went in the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, 6'7". He had a twin brother, Danny, who was a very good Division III player. Brian was, if he was probably an only child, he could have played, I think, in Division II, maybe even in a small D1. He was that good, that skilled. Played in Portugal for a little while. But when you get a guy like that, I mean, it's just
it's game changer.
Just get out of the way and just try not to screw it up, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm sure it's such like an up and down recruiting. I could see myself like emotionally being like, oh, like, you know, when you don't get somebody or being like, oh my God, I can't wait to tell everybody we got this kid.
Yeah,
you know? So explain yourself a little bit, I guess, as far as, you know, philosophy goes, is offensively and defensively. I mean, I watched the NBA today and it's all about the 3-ball and it's all about getting up court quick and, you know, trying to go from A to Z really fast. And, you know, when you kind of look at your style and what you play at Salem or even when you coached before at LaSalle, I mean, what type of coach would you say you are? More offensive minded coach, more defensive minded coach, or do you feel like you're, you know, pretty balanced?
You know, it's a great question. So I think when I first got to LaSalle, having played for Richie Malillo at Somerville, we were very disciplined defensively. You know, we just couldn't score. I've always been in my mind, anyways, when I got to LaSalle, is I wanted to play fast. I wanted to press. I wanted to have a roster of athletic players that could, you know, push the tempo. Our style of man-to-man was like, if you can't guard your guy, you're coming out. I mean, it was, you know, like one of those sort of like, you know, ego things where it was just like, you know, we didn't help anywhere, you know, like it was like, if you can't guard your player.
Right.
And we had some success. We had a lot of success with it. And we'd press. And sometimes, you know, we pressed the whole game. We get down 18-4 and people would be like, what's going on here? And the next thing you know, the other team's tired, we creep and we do our thing. When I got to Salem, interesting, I brought the same approach. You know, we were going to press, we were going to run. I really let the guys go offensively within the structure of how we would like to play. I feel like I've become a better offensive coach. When I first got into coaching, I really ran more sets and plays and some simple continuity stuff. And I've had the great fortune of meeting some wonderful basketball guys that have helped me develop my style offensively. So I feel like I've become a better offensive coach. But what I want to say, which I found, and I hope it doesn't come across egotistical to the listeners, but when I first got to Salem, we had success right away, NCAA tournament again. But what I found is we were losing in the first round. I had lost 3 years at LaSalle in the first round, and then when I got to Salem, we play Gettysburg the first year, and we lose in the first round. And I started to look at those teams that were beating us, and they were all playing, the traditional man-to-man, hard, whether you were pack line or up the line, down the line, whatever your terminology was. And so I tried to change who we were to play like them, because I was thinking, well, if we're going to win in March, we've got to play how to win in March.
Yeah.
And I went through a period, Anthony, where even though in that second year we went to the Sweet 16, I went through a period where I sort of wasn't sure who we were, because I was trying to play a way that really didn't fit who I wanted to be or who I thought we could be. So I look back, even though we were having some success and some consistent success, I'm not sure if you walked into the locker room and asked a player what our philosophy was, they could give you an answer.
Yeah.
And that was something I had to really evaluate myself. And actually during the COVID year, I ended up really rewriting my entire basketball philosophy. So I'm excited to get going, because we're going to be completely different than we've ever been.
Yeah, and I can't imagine COVID must have just been, I've talked to all coaches at different sports, high school and college, and even athletes, even professional coaches, and how everybody handled that it's just so different, because every league and every city and every conference just does things differently, and
Right.
Some people started their seasons, 2 months, so like in basketball, for example, they started on time, where I know some, conferences or leagues didn't start until maybe a month or a month and a half after those initial leagues started. So it was all
Yeah,
sorts of crazy.
We were all over the place. I mean, normally, obviously, we'd start October 15th. We didn't start till December 1. Our school had made a conservative decision, which ended up being great for the university, but we were only able to go in groups of 4, one guy at each side basket, with the ball. We did that for a couple weeks, and we went home for finals, right? And then normally we'd come back December 26th. We didn't come back until the regular students, which is like MLK Day, somewhere around there. We didn't kick off till February 1st. We were able to we had 11 guys that were local enough to get to practice. Our chief of police allowed everybody to come in at once, which was great, but we still couldn't guard each other, which I found. I kind of tried to make some light of it, because the year prior to COVID was the worst year historically in the history of our program. I mean, we were 6-21. I said we were practicing social distancing well before COVID got here. We didn't guard anybody. And so, the COVID year for me, to be honest, I mean, obviously I felt bad for 3 of the seniors that, in essence took their jerseys off as juniors and didn't realize that was it. Our best player, Sean Bryan's coming back for a grad school year, and he's got a shot at 2,000. But I'll tell you what, Anthony, I looked at when we went home on March 12th, I think, of 2020, I said, I got to come back better than I were. So, in some ways for me, it was refreshing having coached, I think, 23 or 24 straight seasons of college basketball. And at this level, again, when there's very little downtime, it was a chance to breathe, man. I tore apart our program from philosophy, recruiting, practice planning, X's and O's, you name it. I stripped it down, and I was hypercritical without being, without allowing myself to get paralyzed by anything. But I was so hypercritical that I broke everything apart, rewrote it. So chance to breathe, man, for me was selfishly good.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because I think the one thing people don't realize, especially at the collegiate level, I mean, your job is year round. Like we talked about the recruiting, we talked about, you're meeting with your coaches after the season, not like the season ends and then all of a sudden, see you guys in September or see you guys in October. It's you're working that entire rest of the year, that summer, getting recruits in. And then obviously in the fall, you're probably practicing and already kind of getting into the, workouts and film or whatever else. So, it's
Well,
good to get that time off.
yeah, and put on top of that, by the way, as I told at the beginning of our conversation, I mean, I have a heavy administrative role. I oversee all the academics for student athletes. I act as the admission liaison for athletics. So, I mean, if you took away my coaching, I still have a full-time job.
Right, right.
So now you're asking, and when schools hire coaches, that's exactly what they hire. They know what they're doing at our level. When I earned the Salem State job, I'm pretty sure they hired me because I had success at LaSalle as a head coach and some success as an assistant at Tufts. They didn't hire a compliance officer and admissions liaisons. Hey, by the way, do you coach basketball?
Right,
So
right, right.
so it's challenging, man. You have to find a balance, and I'm still at 49, still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think it's not easy, and you may never try to find the right,
No.
you never may even find the right balance, because sometimes there just isn't. It's the balance that you can make work, and it's the balance that you can do within a 24-hour window. I mean, let's be real.
Work-life balance is a phrase, unless you really want to sit down and map it out for a coach that's an administrator. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, and probably a whole different podcast we could do just on that
Yeah,
alone.
no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
So obviously one really cool thing about you, and obviously, you did a lot of self-reflection, but things that I love, is like community-wise and youth-wise. I noticed that you do your own basketball camps, and I wanted to give you a minute to kind of maybe talk about that, because I know when we spoke with Gene Bain from Brandeis a few months back, I know he kind of had his first basketball camp. He's been a guest on this and our main course that we do as well. So, we love Coach Bain, and we follow a lot of his stuff. And so to see that you kind of have your own camp and, have your own clinics with kids and youth and within the, Salem community, I think that's great. Just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe chat about it.
I appreciate that, Anthony. Yeah, I inherited a very good situation. Our former AD many, many years ago, Mr. John Galaris, who's passed, a few years back. One of his things when he became the AD at Salem is that he created camps for his coaches. It was a way for him back then, prior to having full-time coaches. It was a way for him to put these, opportunities for all of his coaches to run camps. And they were, when I was a high school kid in Somerville, I mean, my high school coach would always go up and work. At the time, it was Jimmy Todd, who went on to coach the Milwaukee Bucks, LA Clippers, I think the Atlanta Hawks, since retired from the NBA as an assistant coach. And then Brian Meehan, who ended up going to Brandeis. So I knew years ago that Salem had a phenomenal camp. And when I was able to earn the job at Salem, take over, and this is pre-AAU, really. I mean, we were getting 190, 200 kids a week. I mean, it was wild. The rise of AAU and individual instruction and just smaller family sizes have really kind of hurt the mom and pop camps. But, our camp's now 15, I guess it's 15 years, going on 15 years. We've always prided ourselves on trying to give a good week of camp, a lot of instruction. This year I partnered with Tony Gallo, and I think he's one of the most exceptional individual skill developers and coaches around. He's got a very good feel for the game. I watched him this summer with our campers. He can look at a kid who's, maybe he's going to become a varsity player down the road, but he can also work with that kid who's new to basketball, who doesn't know if he's left-handed or right-handed, and he's just a phenomenal guy. So we really did a great job this summer. I credit a lot to Tony, and I've always had a great staff to where, you get that guy who can do all the funny camp stuff. And
Right.
Coach Kyra, my assistant, I mean, he's the master of all those dribbling and, doing ball tricks and stuff. And, we've given out a lot of scholarships over the years to kids that need it. I don't refuse any kid. At the end of the day, we've done our best over the years to make sure every kid who wants to be at camp can get to camp. But yeah, it's been rewarding. We actually had to change the name of the camp a few years ago because of liability. We used to be Viking Basketball School, so I'm not a creative guy. So it's Chris Harvey Basketball, which sounds so self-serving that I'm pretty embarrassed.
Yeah, but I wouldn't look at it like that because I think that's really important because you put the work into this, and I think at the end of the
Yeah,
day, like, if it's your name, it's your name, and it's your name, you're even going to work harder at it because it's your name. So, and you mentioned you get all these people. Like, again, I think with your job and coaching and your full time gig at Salem State, and being a dad, like you learn how to manage and prioritize and get the right people around you. So I think that's also a good skill about you too, is like you might have these great people in camp that can do these things individually that make the camp experience great, but that's also you recognizing that and seeing that and understanding that's what's needed. So
I think
again,
I've
that's kind of,
always done that, Anthony. I've
yeah,
always been humbled to where I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so I always bring people that are better at stuff than I am. I've never, shied away from that. I've never been egotistical. I mean, if you would have come to a practice or a game, I mean, my assistants have voice in timeouts and pregame and post game. I've always delegated um, authority. I wanted, assistants to take ownership and not just be like, let me be the only voice. As long as we're speaking the same vocabulary and there's clarity of communication, I mean, I want my assistants to take ownership. And I've been fortunate and one of my assistants this year just earned the head job at Quincy Lawn Community College. So and I just had my top assistant coach, Kyra. He interviewed. Unfortunately, didn't get either of the two, but he was a finalist for two jobs this off season. And we've been fortunate to help a lot of assistants. Kevin Betancourt at Endicott, Reggie Hobbs. I mean, I can go all the way down the line. We Titus Manderson, the head coach at Fitchburg, was one of our assistants. So we've had a lot of success in helping guys move on.
yeah, and I think that's important what you said, like, divvying up that responsibility to your assistant coaches, and they appreciate that. Like, I know when I was a D coordinator for a long time and just like a low man on the totem pole assistant coach, I know how hard it took for the head coach to finally start trusting me and let me call the defense and not really breathing down my neck about it because he trusted the work ethic and so on. So as an assistant coach, I know you appreciate that because they realize the work you put into it, and that, like you said, as long as you're speaking the same language, then it's just an extension of you. So it's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's always worked for me. I've never had an ego about this. People say, "What's your coaching record?" I'm like 0-0. I'm probably
Yeah,
more responsible for losses than I am wins. But
yeah,
yeah, I think we gotta let guys grow. And that's part of the mentor relationship, right? We coach, we mentor, we command. But you've got to let your assistants take ownership and let them spread their wings. And I've never wanted a yes sir assistant. I've always
right.
wanted somebody. And with that same thing, I also don't want somebody who was just going to argue the other point every 5 seconds just so we can have voices, different opinions on stuff. But I don't want somebody that's just going to go, yo, yeah, that's great. Like,
Right.
let's talk. Let's see what works here.
Right. Absolutely. Off season coach, how much of an off season do you take away from basketball and
Mm.
maybe focus just on being dad and being family or going away? I mean, is there a lot of time you take, not a lot of time you take? I mean, what do you kind of do when the season's over a little bit for
If
yourself?
I didn't have an administrative role, I would do a lot more than I do. I mean, what I do from a basketball standpoint, nothing earth shattering, is once the season ends, and whether it's the NCAA tournament or just a playoff game or a bad season, is we usually take a week off from being around each other. And I tell the guys, listen, I mean, you do what you do, but my advice is, stay out of the gym for a week, get away from it, go reconnect with family, friends, let the body heal up. And, then if you get into your off season conditioning, that's great. But I take a week, and I usually, I take a day off. I usually don't go in the office the next day, and just don't really do much. I mean, you go from literally 100 to 0 pretty quick in terms of basketball. I mean, I always tell like these, maybe it's as I'm getting older, but like, when you first start the season in October, and let's say you have a 3:30 practice, you get out of practice at 5:30, it's still light out. But then as the year wears on, you're going into practice at 3:30 and it's dark as night,
Right,
you
right.
know, and then at the end of the year, as hopefully revving up for a playoff push, it starts to get lighter again when you get out of practice. And it's just like you kind of just come full circle with it. But then when you stop and that season ends, it's like boom. And normally for me, my body shuts down and I'll get sick for a couple of days just from holding all the tension and,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
full throttle. And then again, when you tap, you throw on top an administrative role. I mean,
Yeah, it's nonstop.
it wears you out, man. And sometimes I really do wish that, I'm sort of envious of my colleagues and friends that are, at universities that coach,
Yeah.
and that you
And
can
that's
make
it.
the argument, well, if they don't win and they get fired, they're out. Well,
But they have a
that's the
lot more time to invest and put into that because that's their gig. That's the other
that's
aspect
their
of it.
gig, so it's challenging, but I
Yeah.
don't do anything crazy, man. I don't just get away from it for a little bit.
Now, how do you balance, like, I know for me, the hardest thing with coaching was always taking things home with me, whether it was a tough
Mm,
game or a couple plays or a bad call or, just an absolute, what you thought was a great game plan. And then you get it handed to you a little bit. It's tough to bring it
yeah.
home. But I mean, talk about, especially for those young coaches out there and just, the listeners out there, other coaches. I mean, how do you balance family, in life with, obviously coaching and administration? I mean, like you said, you have two full-time gigs all wrapped into one. But how do you balance that, like, the life of family versus, investing the time that you need to invest in what you do?
Uh, It's gonna again. I'm very simplistic. Like even while we were starting the podcast, like I have journals, and they're success journals, and I try to organize my day and structure and have balance as best I can. I preach that to our players. So I, like to. One of the things I've always prided myself on is I don't ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do. And so, I try to structure my day. So again, with that administrative piece, it's like, okay, an ideal day for me is that I'm going to handle the admin stuff from say 9 to 1. Then I'm going to get my workout in from 1 to 2. And then I'm going to, put on my basketball hat and go 2 to whatever with basketball. See, when it's in season, I tweak it a little bit, but out of season, I extend a little bit more on the admin, but trying to make sure that I recognize and I'm aware. When I was a younger coach, I wasn't aware of when I was pushing the envelope a little too much physically, mentally. So now I really have gotten a lot more cognizant and a lot more aware of when I need to take a step back and make sure that I'm taking care of me. I would always find as a younger head coach, I would end up missing my workouts from like, I'll say November to like February. I'd start off right, and then all of a sudden, I lose it. I wasn't very organized in a lot of respects. So now I've, taking care of myself is the most important thing at the end of the day. So I always prioritize that. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I can give young coaches is to treat your current job like it's the best job in the world. I know it's a little bit off topic, Anthony, but it dawned on me, I got an opportunity to meet Rick Majerus just once at a coach's clinic. And now when he told me what I'm about to say, at first I was kind of like, well, that's easy to say. You make $5 million a year and you live in a hotel,
Yeah.
but then I really thought about it when he said, the problem, and I was the head coach at LaSalle at the time, actually. I remember him saying that the problem that your generation, meaning me at the time, is that you always thinking about the next job and you don't treat the job you have like it's the best job in the world. And, that was just a simple exchange. But as I've gotten older, I thought more about it in that, what he's really, in my mind, my takeaway was how I prepare for my current job is how I'm going to prepare for when I have that quote dream job, and that stuck with me. And I think a lot of young coaches, when I was at LaSalle and you were coming to games, I mean, you probably saw a young guy like myself that was living and dying every possession. I was not in control of emotions a lot with officiating. because I lived and died every possession, right or wrong. If I wasn't having success, how was I ever going to get to Northeastern, to BU, to, Duke, if we're losing games? And, that was something that I did as a young coach, and as I've matured, I like to think I've matured. I'm much more relaxed. I don't get technicals anywhere like I used to. That's for sure. That's for sure. I think I've had like 2 in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice. I think, you mentioned something a little bit earlier than that about taking care of yourself. And, when I was a head coach, I got the head coaching job in February. March, I found out that I was having twins. And then, in the season, my wife going through a pregnancy, and then, my next season, like having babies and, coming home and trying to be there mentally and trying to be a good husband and trying to be a good dad. And you're up at 3 a.m. and you put the babies down, and then you're watching film, and then, you're doing your schoolwork, because I'm a teacher. So I get it. It's just like, and you have to organize yourself. And part of being organized also mentally and physically is taking care of yourself, because if you're just waking up being like, oh, that's right, I have this, and oh, right, I have that, and you're not like mentally shuffling it in your head and putting it into a schedule, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is how I have to do it, yeah, it can wear on you mentally and physically as a coach. So I couldn't agree with you more on that.
I know, I know, this is a different podcast, but, I'm somebody that's dealt with mental health a lot of his young, from the age of 19 to 49, and I've taken time away from coaching to get my mind right. And that may be a conversation for a different day, but at the end of the day, like you got to be the best version of yourself, or try to be. And from your days of coaching high school, and it's like, you care. And it's not that your administration doesn't care. But at the end of the day, they might be looking at it. Hey, did the kids get off the bus safe? Was there any issues on the bus?
Right.
Did all the uniforms get returned? And meanwhile, you're sitting there, trying to raise your children. You're going, should we have blitzed on that down, or what should we have,
Right.
And then I
Right.
stop with my friends, and I'm always like, when I meet these war heroes and police officers, and these men and women that are every day doing frontline type of stuff, and you and I having a conversation, hey, should we hedge your ball screen? Like, give me a break. Like,
Right.
what I
Right.
mean? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I'm just sitting there like, and they're always like, wow, what a great gig you have. And I'm sitting there like, oh, really?
Yeah, right. And I think they don't
Really?
realize that, and I don't think you realize that as a young coach, because you're all in. And then as your life starts to change and things start to change around you,
Right.
that has to change too. Like your mindset of what you're capable of doing versus what you got to do, and figuring out what's in the middle between those is really important. And you can burn out very quickly, and, it can cause you a lot of stress and a lot of, just not feeling great, so I totally agree with you. And like you said, I think it's important that you brought that up, because mental health is a huge thing that's going
Yeah,
on in this
I mean,
world.
I'll give you, we had gone the I was in 2021. So I think we had the 3 years prior to the last season before COVID. We had won the regular season championship. We had won 2 out of the 3 postseason championships. And ironically, the year that kind of was in between those bookends, we were 22-4, and we got upset in the conference semis by Fitchburg, Coach Manderson's club, and they played great that night. They beat us in overtime, and we're 22-4 after that game. And I remember being in the locker room saying to the guys, like, I think we're going to get an at-large bid. I mean, we won 22 games. I mean, are they going to keep us out? Well, we didn't go. And one of the things that I didn't do a great job of in that off season was getting myself ready to go. And then when we came back in the following year, at the end of the year, we ended up going to the NCAA tournament. We won the league and won the postseason championship. But I took a month off. A lot of people didn't know. I mean, I took basically the second half of October through most of November off. I mean, I couldn't move. I mean, I was sitting on a couch just trying to, a win that day was raking the leaves for 5 minutes, and, and I just, have a supportive family and friends and colleagues that checked in and stuff. And it was just, I wasn't ready. I hadn't got away from that season enough to where I could give my best effort for that current season. And, so again, it's like, you gotta take care of yourself, Because at the end of the day, like I say this, I have this kind of joking like personality. Like I guarantee you, when you were coaching high school, you could walk around your campus and tell people you won a state title, even though you didn't. I bet you 5 people would say, "Hey, congrats!" And then the other 5 might say, "I didn't realize we had sports here."
Right.
So, so I mean,
Yeah.
I try to balance it out, man. Be like, respectfully, we're not solving cancer here.
Yeah, no, and I get it. And I think that's important. I'm glad you brought that, aspect of sports up and coaching specifically. I think it's important that people do take the lead in that and mention that and talk about that, because it's a real thing. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I really do. So we're going to jump into the final segment of this podcast. It's called the 2-minute drill. I ask like rapid fire questions, really fun questions. My coaches love
This
segment. So
this is awesome.
I'm going to set our timer here. And again, I'll give you a chance if you want to explain something, you most certainly can. And I do get a challenge flag. If I feel like, hey, I want to hear a little bit more about this answer, I'll throw the challenge flag and we'll have fun with this.
This is great, Anthony.
So we'll get the timer set and here we go.
Awesome.
Of your career of being a head coach, what's the toughest visiting gymnasium you've had to play in as a coach?
Bates, 195 degrees.
What's a song that still kind of gets you juiced up before a game, something you would listen to that kind of gets you pumped up before a big game?
Nothing that the current players listen to. Small Town, John Mellencamp.
What's the most talented basketball team you've ever coached? Whether it's at LaSalle or Salem.
25-14 at LaSalle College. I think if things were right, we could have beaten anybody.
Okay. And you kind of answered this question earlier, but I'll ask it again. More defensive or offensive minded coach?
Offensive.
Okay. What's the most important position in your offense?
The players off the ball.
Okay. Who's the best player in the NBA in your opinion?
I almost said Dennis Johnson. I don't watch the NBA much, man. It still goes through LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. I feel the same way. Which coach growing up did you idolize the most, or even now that you kind of look at and you're just like, wow, what a phenomenal coach?
Well, now it's Ted Lasso, but prior, Coach Rich Malillo, my high school coach, my mentor, he's directed every part of my life since I was 15.
All right. And the last question, you kind of alluded to this, which I was smirking when you did. How many technicals do you think you've gotten in your career?
LaSalle was a lot, man. Shoot, man. I'm gonna say. I remember my first one, and I'll give you 2 quick ones if we're gonna end. My first was Timmy Mahoney. We were coaching LaSalle. I believe we were playing over at Newberry. They used to play at Hellenic College, and I'm riding them, and we're way better than them, respectfully. And I'm whatever reason, I'm me. And he's like, Harv, you got to stop officiating. I'm like, Timmy, you got to start. And that was my first. And a good Lynn Fireman, I believe he's retired. Bob Mullins threw me out of a game at LaSalle. The second tee after I had already, again, we win the game, but I had already asked him a question. I got a tee, and then he comes over to the bench later in the game, and I said, Bob, can you give me a technical for what I'm thinking? He stops for a second, and he goes, I guess not. I go, I think you suck tonight. So that was it, man. But I'd probably say 30, man. I don't know.
I appreciate the honesty, because every coach is like, oh, well, I had Dennis Singer on from Wilmington High School, and he was probably the only basketball coach that was pretty straight up with me about, he's like, a lot. I got a lot. So
yeah, I don't know.
So I appreciate the honesty.
And you were there for some of it, man. So 30 might be conservative.
I'm not sure. I definitely have seen you get teed up. That's why I was curious about how you were going to answer that question, which is great. I mean, listen.
Yeah, I've been a little bit better, man. I've been a little bit better.
Well, listen, you survived the 2-minute drill, and I just want to thank you for coming on this podcast today. I know you have a really busy schedule, especially with, school about to start back up, for obviously your school, but kids too. And I'm sure it's a crazy time for you guys, but I just want to say thanks for coming on. I really appreciate the time with you. And as I said, I was a big fan of you when I was in college, following the program, and it's cool to be able to have you on here now and talk a little bit more about how you've grown in your career.
Oh, it's an honor, man. I really appreciate it. I had a blast. I had a blast, and sometimes I guess to end with some other advice is appreciate what you have when you have it. And those fans at LaSalle were phenomenal. We had a great run there, and they always came out and supported us. So I'm always going to have a special place in my heart for that. And I really appreciate what you're doing, getting the word out on coaches and their life, and not just talking, X's and O's. I mean, the podcast beyond X's and O's. I mean, there's we all have good X's and O's, right? But
Yeah.
the stuff we do behind the scenes is equally as important, if not more.
If not more. I agree. If not more,
Yeah,
for sure. So, I
no
appreciate
doubt.
it, Coach. I appreciate the time. And, so from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, Chris Harvey, Salem State University. Till next time.
Thanks, everybody.